about the Messara report every week ad nauseum, because other things keep coming up. And one of those things which has come up, Sheldon, has been a Te Rapa track, which is less than ideal.
And he must feel like he's sort of donning the pads and ducking under the helmet and sort of walking out into the middle of the paddock with no runs on the board, wickets falling all over the place. Ken Rutherford joining in us from, I don't know where you are, Ken, but it's quite dark where you are. It's light here in New Zealand. I think I'll, thanks for joining us, by the way. Just start with one that's probably straight at the stumps on Yorker length. How come New Zealand's arguably best betting track is under so much compromise these days?
Yeah, look, we had a renovation done back in February, guys, and it didn't go well. Sand carpeting gets done every 5 or 6 years at Te Rapa, and it was time to get it done again, and the job was shoddy. It's still under some legal issues going through the courts at the moment, so it's been very disappointing. We got through sort of April, May, June reasonably well, but certainly when the winter turned awry and was very wet, the kickback was exacerbated. The jockeys quite rightly have kicked up and have criticised the track roundly over the last 2 or 3 months, as have the stipendiary stewards. So basically the club used dumps over the last couple of weeks. We've done some remedial work last week. We're very hopeful that we'll get through spring and summer racing with a view to do some more work February, March next year. One thing that has uncovered track issues we've had, it's been a further issue with the drainage, and that's what we're starting with in 2019. So there's kind of two side-by-side parallel issues. One, certainly the shoddy sand job back in February, but also the drainage. We had our drains all scoped, all 338 drains were scoped, scanned and cameraed about 2 to 3 weeks ago, and out of about, as I say, 338, only around 12 to 13% are working as you'd expect them to. Now, the drains were put in, as you all know, back in the late 90s. The Te Rapa track was subject to a major renovation where it basically changed from what was a very bog-like track through the 80s and 90s into a top-class surface, which we know it has been over the last couple of seasons and more. So we're very hopeful that some more drainage work done February and March will get back to where we should be as a premier winter venue in New Zealand.
Ken, Bruce Sherwin here. Just where are we standing in terms of a return to Te Rapa, and what are we on target?
As you know, Bruce, Waikato lad, the last week's weather was absolutely outstanding here in the Waikato. It's amazing how things have dried up. And in terms of doing the remedial work last week, the timing couldn't have been better in terms of the weather. The weather certainly played ball, but the weather will have to continue to play ball, Bruce, in terms of the next sort of 6 weeks where we've penciled in, not quite penned in with bold type and underline the 22nd of October, Labor Day. We know that's the Sartre Memorial Group 2 over 1,400 metres on that day. It's a big race leading to 2,000 guineas, and we're extremely hopeful, confident that we'll get to that day and be racing at Te Rapa.
Ken, a lot further down the track than October is the potential that Te Rapa could eventually be sold and the Waikato racing sort of congregate for a green fields project. What's your views on that?
We have to look at it, Mick. I think I'm one of the voices who've been saying for some time, we keep doing the same thing, the same result will occur. And look, the Messara port, it's just next to me here. It's a lot of blurb, a lot of intelligent surmising on our industry. Some of it perhaps slightly off track, but certainly the 95% of it is stuff we need to be looking at. There's 17 real big, robust recommendations there, aren't there? And it's behoving on all of us to have a real good look at it. One of the big aspects from a Waikato Racing Club perspective, 2026, 2027, Te Rapa's down to be closed and be moved to another venue somewhere in the Waikato. So that's something which is that focuses the mind at administrative level, and it focuses the mind at directors level. And that's certainly something we had a board meeting at the Waikato Racing Club 6 days ago, and it's a mighty big part of our agenda now. It's something we have to really look at and see where the opportunities lie, not just for us as a club, but as importantly, more importantly, as an industry.
So, Ken, what's the 5% of the Messara report that you think's off track?
Oh, I think some of the venue closures, Sheldon, to be honest. I think if you look, I'm from down south. I heard you talking about Rabinski and Bone Crusher and I think 1987 or 1988 at Wingatui. So art's still very much down there to a large extent. To say that Wakawaiti should remain open, and I think it was Oamaru might have to close, probably that's part of the 5%. I think there's little bits and pieces which can be tinkered somewhat. It's an amazing document, isn't it? I mean, to think that John Messara was commissioned, I believe, in April of this year to put together that document, and it's come out sort of 3 to 4 months later. It's amazing, its detail, and it's a way forward for the industry. The other big reset, I believe, and this major, I think, benefit advantage to be had is just how we do our wagering in New Zealand. And certainly, the aspects of the Messara report around wagering, I think there's some incremental gains to be had pretty much straight away by cutting a lot of costs in terms of the way our wagering engine works, but also examining some of those real growth opportunities which around the world are occurring.
Just going back to the track closures there, Ken, you were spending a lot of time in South Africa, and I believe that you were over there when South Africa sort of went through the same sort of scenario. Does South Africa compare in any way, shape or form to New Zealand racing in that vein, or is it just the horse and jockey thing that they've got in common?
Yeah, horse and jockey thing. Also, I think the foal count, the horse count in racing is very similar over there, Sheldon. I think 20, 25 years ago, South Africa had around about 15 to 17 tracks around the Republic. Now they're down to about 8. They've got multi-use tracks there in terms of Port Elizabeth being a grass service at Fairview and in the inside having a poly track. They've got at Greyville in Durban. They closed down Clearwood, which is out by the old airport in Durban. They put a poly track around the inside there. So it's far more centralisation, rationalisation of resources around some key venues around the Republic. So that's occurred. It caused a lot of angst and still does. Johannesburg had 3 metropolitan tracks at Gosforth Park, Serpentine and Newmarket. Now only Serpentine remains. So those kinds of things do create a lot of anxiety, and then people want to hold on to the past. But I think there's certainly no doubt now in terms of South Africa, it's been the right move in terms of trying to get more consolidation around their racing tracks.
Coming back to the Te Rapa track, Ken, the long-term remedial work, could it see Te Rapa out of action for a while in the autumn?
That was the kind of choices we had, Bruce, was to do some more of the long-term remedial work right now, which would probably take us, probably would have taken us right out past summer, right into autumn, but be ready to race in April or May. We believe February, March into April will be enough time to do the work that we need to do. We've scoped some of it out, probably 70 to 75% of it's been scoped out, but we'll make a call at our next board meeting probably in October.
Ken, just looking at your track here, and we see that kickback, and it does raise the question, talking about kickback, about synthetic tracks. Everybody supposes the synthetic track in Waikato is going to be at Cambridge. Any interest in having it at Te Rapa, or do you not have the facilities there to house enough horses to make it a major training centre?
Yeah, good point. I think it's from a training perspective, Mick, it's something we have considered in terms of upping the ante at Te Rapa and putting more boxes in and creating more of an environment for trainers, but that's unlikely to happen. Part of the whole Waikato Greenfields project, which has been labelled in the Messara report, is seeing how Waikato racing might be in 2025, 2030. And if you talk to the town planners around Hamilton, there's some pretty keen statistics which you should be aware of, and that's the population of Hamilton is going to be 250,000 in 2030. So a place like Te Rapa is not really the place to be training horses in 2025, 2030. It may not even be the place to be racing horses at that time either. It's basically the track could possibly be squeezed out of the urban centre of Hamilton. I was really intrigued to watch one of the news items last week, I think on TV3, we were talking about golf courses in Auckland, how they're going to be squeezed out in the next sort of 10 to 15 years as that property, that land value has become so incredibly valuable in terms of the inner city of Auckland. The same thing, kind of scenario argument is around Te Rapa in 2025, 2030. So that's something which we're very conscious of, very keen to investigate around the board table at the Waikato Racing Club. It's not so much about where the Waikato Racing Club is now, but seeing where it might be in the future. And that's why we have to give this Waikato Greenfields project a darn good look. You know, we've got to be very fair dinkum about giving it a good look and doing the feasibility study flat out and see what is in the best interest of racing in the Waikato.
Okay, Ken, thanks for joining us here on Weigh In, and I guess you need to get back and skim over that Messara report for the 3rd or 4th time this morning. Thanks for joining us and giving us your insight and general view on the racing game going forward in New Zealand.
You shall.
That went way better than it could have gone. Skype on Sunday morning, you could get Ken's emails coming in.
A few messages to
I thought, oh my God, this could be really bad. But thank you, Ken. And it's good to hear what Ken had to say. Look, you need to think about these things, and the Greenfield project to them would sound like, well, you're closing our track down. But let's be honest, Waikato's too important, Bruce, to not have everything go right down there. It's the heart of New Zealand thoroughbred racing.